terribly surprising. From Alaska's perspective, we've had several Alaskan-owned independent pharmacies that have gone out of business over the last several years. Obviously, it's happening all over the country. And the issue of the lack of transparency seems to be front and center. Anchorage right now, our largest city, my hometown, only has one independent pharmacy left. That's Bernie's Pharmacy, run by a great Alaskan named Teresa Hall, who's doing a great job trying to serve local Alaskans. In Sitka, we don't have a Walgreens or a CVS. We do have an Alaska family-owned independent pharmacy. The White family runs that. They do a great job, but I hear about their struggles. The numbers are pretty dramatic here. According to a 2022 report from the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, there are 66 PBM companies, with the three largest, Express Scripts, CVS Care, and Optimum RX, controlling more than 80% of the market and serving 270 million Americans. That is some serious market power. This is the opposite of small business. So what I wanted to ask each of the panelists, two questions, and you can take them in order. I'll just let all of you respond. One is transparency. The bill that we're talking about today, is it the right amount of transparency? Are there other things we can do with regard to transparency for PBMs? I think that is a really obvious starting point, but how deep do we need to go on that? And what are we missing on that idea of transparency that may or may not be in this bill? And then secondly, this is a little bit more current, but I want you to kind of look at the current situation. I have concerns about the current situation. But structurally, is the FTC the correct avenue to address this transparency issue? Are there other agencies we should be looking at? I'm starting to have increasing concerns about the leadership at the FTC. I did not vote for the chair, Linda Kahn. There was a Wall Street Journal article just recently. The last Republican commissioner on the FTC is resigning, and she's doing so in part because she said, quote, Kahn's willful disregard of congressionally imposed limits on agency jurisdiction, defiance of legal precedent, abuse of power. So I'm getting a little nervous about the FTC, both currently with the leadership, but also, is it structurally the right federal agency to be taking a look at the transparency issues? And that, I think that is what the law that we're looking at proposes. So both those questions, I'll open up to all the witnesses.
Thank you, Senator. And I'd like to say that Bernie Clouda was a dear friend and mentor of mine.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, they do great work, but they're, it's tough. And that's, that's our big city, Anchorage, right?
Yeah.
And they're it in Anchorage.
They are it. To answer your first question about, is this the right amount of transparency? I don't know yet the answer to that question. But what I do know is that what we have now is not working.
Yeah.
And we want to see PBMs regulated the same way that everybody else in healthcare is regulated.
Do you have a view on the FTC?
I think my answer is the same. But what I can tell you is that, from our perspective, we're seeing unfair and anti-competitive business practices in terms of our interactions with PBMs, and okay. I think that's how I don't know who else would help us deal with that.
Any other witnesses on both the transparency question or the FTC question?
So to the first question about transparency, I do think that this is really important, probably the most important piece of legislation to deal with the issue, to bring light to many of the other problems. There are other issues, copay accumulators, HR 830, gag clauses, fail first step therapy, and other things. So there are other problems, but as you deal with PBMs, I frequently feel like it's a game of whack-a-mole. And transparency, I think, sheds light on many of the other challenges that is the best way and most comprehensive way to move forward to make meaningful change. The second issue of jurisdiction, I don't know.
I think also on the transparency and the scope, I think another sort of perhaps less appreciated actor in this market has been the role of the benefits consultants or the people who are trying to help employers navigate this and pick what PBM contract they should be signing. In many cases, those benefit consultants are not playing a fiduciary role for the employer, but are actually being compensated by the PBMs as well. And so to look at, even if the supposed brokers of information here are being incentivized in ways that are detrimental to the system as well. I'll just say on the second, there's also the GAO, there's also other agencies that can be involved in this too. I think, to the extent that there are issues at the FTC, that needs to be addressed more broadly, right? Obviously for many reasons.
Any views on that?
I would point you to the references in my testimony. FTC, DOJ, and others are very concerned about the effects of the transparency, particularly the way it's laid out in Section 2, way too granular. It was with any regulation as an economist, I like to be able to see the law have clearly defined terms, and there's a lot of terms that the administrative state is going to be able to interpret. And I share the concerns that the FTC we have now would reinvent the lexicon, to be frank.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.